Why do you think you should be the number one safety coming off the board this year?
My ball production first though. Some people probably had more picks than me overall, but what I did in 2 years, nobody else in the class did.
Boy, could Green Bay use some of that ball production on the back end out of their safeties moving forward. And that was Cam Kinchin's safety from Miami. And expect to see a little bit more of him as this draft process unfolds. It's going to be a big day this afternoon when testing kicks off for the defensive backs and the tight ends. Granted, we're not going to focus on the tight ends because we pretty much addressed that pretty satisfactorily with a lot of upside there last year's draft. So we're focusing on primarily the safeties and the cornerbacks. Safeties being obviously that huge position of need that the Packers have that, maybe we'll see where it isn't quite as big of a need. Maybe that gets addressed in free agency, but definitely the back end is somewhere that we want to focus. And with that first round pick, I would be more surprised if we went safety over cornerback. And I think cornerback is definitely a position that we're going to look at targeting there. But before we get into that, let's take a look at some of the performances of the guys in that defensive line, edge, and linebacker group from yesterday. We kicked it off with Peyton Wilson, who, one of the guys that was definitely going to be a freak athlete at this. The medical concerns were what they were, but he did not disappoint on his combine performance. He just flew during that 40-yard dash. He ran a 4.43, and he also had a 34.5-inch vertical jump. Definitely one of the more athletic linebackers in this draft class. Next up with him was Edgerrin Cooper, who also ran pretty fast, a 4.51, a little bit slower, same vertical jump, explosive athletes, rangy, fast guys that are going to fly around and would pair really well in the middle of that defense with Quay Walker. Another guy that I wanted to call out was Cedric Gray, who did perform well in this combine as well. A little bit slower than I was actually expecting him to test, especially given that he was a former receiver, but still ran well, 4.57, I believe it was, and, did well in the field testing as well. But on the defensive line, we did see a few things. The one that stood out was a guy that I called out that we didn't really look at his interviews from yesterday, and that was Braden Fisk, who just topped the charts on the defensive tackle board. Among defensive tackles, he was the fastest at 4.78. He had the highest vertical jump with 33.5 inches, and he had the fastest short shuttle with 4.37, which is just a lightning fast number. I think he's more of the, pass rush penetrator type on the interior of a defensive line. Very impressive athlete, but I think his skill set is something that would be more closely mirrored by Devontae Wyatt from a traits perspective. So not somebody that I would think we would reach for and draft. Definitely seems like he's a firm second-round pick, but could potentially rise based on this performance into the late first round. Chris Jenkins, another guy, obviously, got the cachet of his name out there. Big program from Michigan, ran relatively well, 4.91, weighed in at 299 pounds. Overall, like the sixth most athletic defensive tackle, according to NFL.com, from this combine. Nice performance overall, but I think the thing that's really going to show for him is just his football IQ. And I think the interviews and just the way he presents himself and can articulate things is going to be what's going to help him rise his draft stock. Performed adequately from a measurable perspective. Now it's all going to be about that tape, and it's going to be about the way he can communicate and, the kind of character that he has in those meetings with the teams. And then T'Vondre Sweat, who joked a bit at the podium about, his 40. He did weigh in at 366 after not having weighed at the Senior Bowl. He, looks impressively big. Ran relatively well for a guy 366 pounds, ran a 5.26, which, interestingly enough, Robert Griffin III tweeted out that if you adjusted pound for pound his 40 time to someone that's 185 pounds, he would roughly run a 4.26. So pretty impressive time. Not that that means anything at all, but I just thought it was a relatively cool, interesting, comment out there on the interwebs. But overall, like his his performance physically wise was not all that impressive. I think he came in at like a 4.06 RAS score according to MathBomb. Not the impressive athlete that you would necessarily hope, but very big guy. He would probably be a more impressive athlete if he was, 15, 20 pounds lighter and had a little bit more movement to him. But he's really just going to clog up the interior of a defensive line at the size that he is. And then on the edge, Darius Robinson was a little bit underwhelming to me on some of his performance from a measurables perspective. Didn't seem quite as fluid, was a little bit tight in some of it. But an interesting player comparison that Daniel Jeremiah made was to Cam Jordan, who was actually on site at the combine as well, and almost like identical size from height to hand size, wingspan, all of that pretty much identical to him. Which that's not a bad comparison if he could meet that same threshold. And then Marshawn Nealand, another guy that we talked about yesterday, like impressive 3-cone time. He was the fastest 3-cone. He was the fastest on the short shuttle for defensive ends and edges, and shows some of just that speed to power that he kind of talked about yesterday in his interview as well. But without further ado, let's go on and move on to this cornerback safety group that we're really going to be focusing on. And there's a lot of guys that have been mocked to the Packers in these spots, whether it's Cooper DeJean, which, as Daniel Jeremiah put, just seems like he's a Packer, which I'm not disagreeing, and I would love that. But some of these interviews actually maybe are turning me more towards some of these other guys. Like Ennis Rakestraw Jr. was very impressive with his interview, and the physicality he talks about playing with is part of the reason that I'm so impressed.
But what separates you? Why do you want to be that tone setter on defense?
I love the physicality of the game, so tackling is the one thing that I feel like most corners should love to do, because now what they like to do is run to the boundary and to see and test you as a man, or you a tackler. The way I play and how physical I play and the way I tackle is probably my mindset was growing up. My mom had me 3 days before being 16, and a lot of people told my mom negative things, and we wouldn't be in this situation, or I wasn't going to be good enough. So my recruitment in high school, I was a late bloomer. My 11th grade year, I had group of 5, no Power 5s. So I wanted to change it around and change the narrative. So I had to guard a couple 5-star guys and earn my name. So I always have the underdog story in me, no matter what. Even at the next level, I'm always be the underdog.
I love how he says, they want to run to the outside and test how much of a man you are. I think that is just speaks to his love of the game and the physicality that he wants to bring, and he wants to set that edge and set the tone for that defense, which, we've got some guys that, can talk and they're great in coverage, but this guy can cover and he's willing to come up and make plays and run support. So I would love to see a guy like that out there. Circle back to Cooper DeJean, another very versatile guy, willing tackler again, some versatility in, will he potentially move to safety, or, he can kick inside and play in the slot as well. And he actually talked to Chris Sims about, how him playing quarterback in high school along with safety actually helps him a bit as a defensive back.
So I played quarterback and safety in high school. I feel like that helps a lot.
Yeah.
Because as a quarterback, you think through the different coverages and the ways you can hurt the defense. Based on that coverage. When you're playing corner, that all kind of goes through your head.
Right.
And you try to take those things away.
Yeah.
Understand how they might try to hurt you.
Another first-round talent that the Packers might be interested in targeting is Kool-Aid McKinstry, and he talks a bit about the physicality and discipline that's required to play in the slot. Which again, he's an outside corner, but that willingness to play inside and understanding of the physicality that'll come along with playing inside could be really important. And then a little bit later on in the draft, maybe we end up looking, end of the second, third round, as we've got a couple of both second and third round picks. There is going to be Max Melton, brother of Bo Melton, who obviously shined at the end of this past season for the Packers. But he talks a bit about, the relationship he and his brother had growing up, and some of, the versatility that he was able to incorporate into his game as a cornerback from some of the battles that he and his brother had. Again, he was a former receiver, so originally they worked out together doing the same kind of stuff, and then it shifted to where, iron sharpens iron, as he said, and, that's helped him progress as a cornerback.
We've been going at it ever since we was little. We was actually both our receivers at first, so it was really just doing drills together. But when I transferred to DB, it was he'll come home from college, I'll still be in high school. We'll start doing DB stuff. He'll give me releases, this, that, and the third. And it's really just iron sharpens iron. I look forward to doing that in the league also.
The safety position is a bit undervalued in the NFL these days. Highly important position, last line of defense, but with so many shells, they're not necessarily putting the same value on those positions. And that reflects somewhat in their draft stock as well. And that's where we're kind of looking at pick 41, maybe pick 57 as the range that we're probably going to target one of those safeties. We heard a little bit from Cam Kinchins earlier in this video, and he talks more about, some of the versatility that he has and really his focus on the area that he's going to develop of his game as the last line of defense for the defense.
I bring everything to the table. I can go out there and cover tight ends, cover slots. I could go in the box and be in your run support, and then I could play the post exceptional. So,
can you tell us what's the biggest strength of your game, and what do you think you need to work on to be successful at the next level?
I think my instincts, not having too many bad plays on tape. My average is kind of, good, and I have splash plays in there. I think the thing I can work on the most is probably open field tackling. Most people might say I do it well, but, it's a room of improvement. You're the last line of defense. You can't let nothing get behind you.
And the other guy that's right up there in the battle for, the first safety off the board is Minnesota's Tyler Nubin. And Tyler Nubin talks a bit about, the relationship that he has with Buccaneers safety Antoine Winfield Jr., who actually was there during his freshman year at Minnesota and has served as a bit of a mentor and somebody to model his game after as he looks to, join the ranks of the NFL.
He did a really great job my freshman year, especially of, allowing me to, sit in with him, watching film, teaching me things, on the side, and, just being that big brother and, just being able to be a great example for everybody in the room.
Right.
Yeah.
But there is one red flag that, there is for Tyler Nubin. He's a Chicago guy, and he tells Chris Sims who his team was growing up.
Being a Chicago guy, I always, like the Bears, especially their defense. Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs, Julius Peppers, guys like that. Charles Tillman, I really was liked him a lot. His peanut punch was something that I always tried to emulate in my game as well.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't been able to perfect it yet, but I'm going to figure it out.
All right. All joking aside, though, Tyler Nubin can help his draft stock significantly with the way he performs at the combine. So he's somebody to keep a close eye on to see if he, meets some of the athletic thresholds to raise his draft stock up a bit. The other guy that I'm kind of focusing on here was Javon Bullard, and he actually was a very impressive interview as well. And one of the things that stood out to me was his enthusiasm for the process. He really shows how much he loves the game of football and is just excited to be here, be present, and show teams, his football IQ and what he can do on the football field.
It was amazing. A dream come true. I mean, I'm like a kid at a candy store, man. Like, I'm talking to head coaches, GM, shaking hands with guys that, I wouldn't dream of seeing, just everything, man. It was more so me showcasing my skill set, my mental abilities, and my football IQ, and them getting to know me as off the field as well as on, and it was amazing, man.
By no means was that an exhaustive list. There are still other guys that we didn't necessarily see as much of on the interview side or on media, but we need to take a look at. And one of them, Quinyon Mitchell, who did a few interviews but didn't say anything that specifically stood out to me. But he's the guy that's been rising swiftly up draft boards and is probably not even going to be available when the Packers pick at 25 anymore. But a smaller school guy from Toledo really shined at the Senior Bowl against, increased competition, and definitely has worked his way up to probably like a top 15, top 20 pick at this point. Some other guys to keep an eye on, safety Bo Braid from Maryland, safety Kalen Bullock from USC, though he's a little bit on the light, undersized kind of side of things. Great ball production there as well. Malik Mustafa from Wake Forest. TJ Tampa from Iowa State, who unfortunately won't be testing. Same with DeJean, also not testing at the combine due to recovering from some injuries. And then also safety Dadrian Taylor Demerson from Texas Tech. Some, a smattering of guys that we'll have to keep an eye on as this draft process unfolds. And unfortunately, some of them will have to wait until pro days to kind of get a better read on where they are, athletic wise, and see if they'll really meet Green Bay's thresholds.